Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Sunny, and I have with me Iwan, who's my partner in crime.
Both of us are in Singapore, so it's good to be here.
Yep, it's fantastic. It's been an awesome atmosphere over here, and we've been presenting session left, right, and center. And we thought we'll talk about a little bit about our session today.
Yeah.
And this is about performance and capacity management.
Yeah.
Essentially, after 7 years of VMworld, or
Yeah.
VMware,
VMware,
and
not
6
VMworld.
years of being at VMware, this is what we have learned, and we
Yeah.
thought we'll share
Yeah.
that today with you guys out there.
So here's our full contacts, our Twitter, our LinkedIn, our email address, so keep in touch. So if you ever go to Singapore, so let us know.
Absolutely. So basically, before we talk about the two distinct layers, I just want to go ahead and give a disclaimer that this is a 3-hour long session, which we compressed for VMworld, and we gave a session of 1 hour. And now we have compressed it further to 15 minutes, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what we get, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so we'll try to
So-
make it entertaining for you in the next 15 minutes.
But the full deck of that 3 hours that we have delivered in Singapore is available at our blog, right? So it's okay. So let's start. We want to share something that we want to share about this. There's this concept called the two distinct layers, right? At the top layers is the VMs, and very clearly there is a demarcation line,
Yep.
and that is where the SDDC lies.
So we're talking about monitoring here, right? And if you want to go ahead and do performance and capacity management and monitoring, then you have to look at these two layers separately. And there's a clear demarcation between these two layers, as Iwan
Exactly.
just mentioned.
So the VM is the consumer layers. This is what the VM owners cares. This is what the application team cares.
Yep.
And then there is the provider layers,
Yep.
right? This is what
where
we
the-
care.
Yeah, absolutely. We cared about that, and we care about you. So
Right.
it's important that you understand that what is important to you.
Yeah.
For you, it has to be the consumer layer, because they're the one who are giving you business. They're the one who's running their applications
Exactly.
on top of your infrastructure.
So because typically the VMs and the infrastructure is pretty reliable, so uptime is pretty good. So it's not about availability. The first thing that they care is performance.
Absolutely.
right? So at this layer, if I'm a VM owner, I only care about my VM.
Yep.
You may have 1,000 other VMs, and I don't care about it, right? I only care about my VM.
Yep, that's true. And at the infrastructure layer, it's different, right? You have to serve everyone. You have to take care of all the VMs which are running in that infrastructure, which is difficult, right? You have to take care of everything, and everybody should be happy.
Yeah, and then once you take care of performance, which is the number one thing, then you can move on to capacity,
Oh,
because
yeah.
you don't
That's a
do
big one.
capacity on a daily basis, right?
True that.
So at the VM level, it's about right size, making sure you don't have that over provisioning VM. How do you solve that?
That's right. And at the SDDC, or the infrastructure layer, it's all about how well you're using that infrastructure, or the investments which you've done in that infrastructure. So we'll dive into that. And once we're done with performance and capacity, we usually talk about availability and configuration.
Not this
But,
time.
Not this time, yeah.
Okay.
It's too less.
So in capacity, you want to make sure the utilization is right. It's not too high, but it's not too low either,
Yeah,
right? Because
you
then
should be
you
right there.
overinvested. So let's take a look at it. Let's dive into performance, right? So how do we know that your IaaS, your VMware environment is fast, right?
Yep. So usually if you look at your screen out there, you will see that people look at those numbers. They look at utilization, which is a relative term, and that's what you say later on as well, to look at performance. I mean, it's impossible for you to say that if I have 10K IOPS on my storage box, I will get all the performance I need, because ultimately the performance counter should not be IOPS or throughput, it should be latency. And it depends upon how quickly those 10K IOPS are returned from that storage, right?
Yeah. So it's not about your infrastructure, it's about how well you serve your customers, the
True that.
consumers layers, right?
Yep.
So we know that so let's talk about what counter do you now put on the table for the VM owner, for the application team.
Yep.
We know it's not utilization.
True
right?
that. It's not utilization.
Yeah.
It has to be performance. And in performance, there are two things, right? If you're looking at a virtual machine from a CPU and memory perspective,
Yeah.
it has to be contention,
Yes.
which is a derived metric within vRealize Operations Manager.
Yeah.
And what about storage, Iwan?
So storage is latency, right? It's you can have 10K IOPS, but if they come back, let's say in a very high latency that is not acceptable by the VM owner, by your application, then that means your IaaS is not performing.
Absolutely. So what we do in this overall session of 3 hours is that we go ahead and talk about this concept of the consumer layer and the provider layer like a restaurant. In a restaurant, you have a kitchen and a dining area. The dining area is the consumer layer, and the kitchen is the provider layer. So you're first going to take care of your consumers so that your restaurant business is good, and hence you need to take care of your infrastructure or the virtual machines first. How do you do that, Iwan?
So SLA, you got to have an agreement.
Are you sure?
Yeah. What do you promise, right?
Absolutely.
If you don't have an agreement on what you promise, then the definition of performance becomes debatable.
Absolutely. So you have a availability SLA of 5 nines or 6 nines or whatever. But if you don't have a performance SLA, then the concept which we are talking about over here will be impossible to measure. And hence, we can see in this screen itself, and Iwan will run through it. Iwan, you want to talk about that?
So continuing the story, capacity is also. Typically, people do capacity. I look at my cluster utilization, 70%. It's time to buy new clusters.
Yep.
10%. I got plenty of space.
Yep.
But we need to take into account performance.
True that.
Right?
Yep.
Your cluster can be 20% utilization, but the VMs are experiencing bad contention, high contention, and that is above the threshold that you agree that cluster is full.
And that threshold is the performance SLA, so register that.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to sum it up quickly?
Yeah. So the one key takeaway we want to share here is there is performance and there is capacity. They are not the same thing.
Yep.
Right?
So if you look at performance, it's about the VM. And if you look at infrastructure, that's about capacity. So if your VM is good, you're performing well. And if you have capacity or the right capacity to serve that VM, then you're good at the infrastructure layer as well. So those are the two areas you need to monitor.
So there is no such thing as your IaaS performance. It's your VM performance. It's how you serve them, right?
True.
And the performance counter is the contention or latency experienced by the VM.
Okay.
Not by your ESX, not by your data store or array, right?
Agreed. And we can talk about SLA and availability, but not today. So let's move on and get on to a dashboard.
Let's look at one example, right?
Okay.
Because a lot of people have less over-provisioned VM. So how do you tackle that?
Yes. How do you tackle that?
And I think the audience here are actually quite technical. So you know they cause performance issue, right? And you know that they are bad for your environment. You want to reduce them. The question is, you know it is bad, but the question is how bad it is. What is the degree of this over-provisionings, right?
Now this is exciting because here Iwan turns into a scientist and he takes certain metrics and turns them into, what do you call them? They basically speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah, so what we do here is we create a dynamic groups, right? Let's say you grab all those 8 vCPU VMs.
Okay.
You may have 200 of them, whichever the number is, right?
Okay.
And what you do is you plot the maximum CPU utilization of all these 200 VMs.
Okay.
Right? And you take it every 5 minutes. And it doesn't really matter which VM. Let's say at 8 o'clock, it could be VM number 100 that hits 80%. We plot 80%.
I think that number should be around 100% when you plot that.
Yeah, so in an environment that is healthy, that is right size,
Okay.
the max CPU utilization among all these large VM should be high because it only takes one VM to be high.
To reach there. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And the same thing with the average.
It
if
should
they
be
are
somewhere in between, right?
Yeah,
It's 50%.
If they are right size, right?
Yep.
If they are right size. And now the thing about the line chart is it doesn't tell you which VM.
Okay.
The utilization of all these VM.
Okay.
So we complement that with a heat map.
Okay, that makes
Okay.
sense.
And
Can you show that to them?
Sure, definitely. Let's just do that.
Awesome. So that's the dashboard which Iwan is talking about. And Iwan, if I'm getting you right, on the left-hand side, you're looking at the max and the average?
Correct.
Utilization.
Correct.
All right. And I don't see it's going beyond 25%.
So exactly. So we
What the
plot
hell?
the max CPU utilization of all the large VM here, and you can plot it in the past 24 hours,
Okay.
or even like 3 months.
Okay.
If not a single line exceeds 25%, that means not a single one of them ever use more than 25%.
And I think all of you sitting there would get the same picture because I have worked with customers and all of them have the same problem, right?
Yeah. So that is the line chart. But if you want to know individual VM,
Okay.
this is where the heat map comes in.
Awesome.
Right? So in
What
the
are these black things?
So in the heat map, right,
Okay.
you plot them. So every box is a VM, and you use the color code. So because you want them to be healthy, so 50% is green,
Okay.
100% is red because
Okay.
they are overutilized, but 0% is black because you don't want them to be running at 5%, 10% because that means they are over provisioned.
Okay, so basically you're saying that if those boxes are black, those are the culprits.
Exactly. Right.
Okay, all right.
And what we can take this further. We can create a top end and list the VMs. Right?
Oh yeah, so that becomes easier. Now you know the name of the VM right at the
Exactly.
glance.
And you can click on any of the VM, and it will show you the actual VM, CPU, and memory utilizations.
All right, so that's the counter which people look at usually.
Yeah.
in the traditional world, and we don't want them to look at that. We want them to look at the other things which you are showing here. So we want to look at contention and latency. And if I look at this, I see that the utilization is not going beyond 50%. So why do they have everything?
Exactly, right? So now, that counter tell us, this dashboard quickly tell us about the entire environment.
Okay.
But if I'm a VM owner and I have 16 vCPU,
Okay.
and you tell me to size down to 5, well, I need to be convinced.
True
You
that.
know? And you got to show me every single of my 16 vCPU.
Yes.
Right? Now this is the dashboard.
Oh, so here, what I can see is on the left you have the VMs, and on the right you're showing each vCPU.
Yes, this one.
That is nice.
Yeah. So we show inside here every single vCPU, and we
Okay.
can take it back in the past, let's say 30 days, 90 days.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
If the numbers don't show high utilization, they're not being used.
So to sum it up, I can take this to my application guys and I can show them that this is what it is. You're not using it. And if you're not using it, give it back.
Yeah, it's better for you to be right size, right? High better
Absolutely.
performance. Now the second thing you want to talk about, right, is does anyone abuse your environment?
Okay,
Right?
so you want to find out the guy. So we were joking about this, right? You go to a restaurant and it's all you can eat sushi. You can get one person who can eat everything, right? The big one. So you need to find out that person in your environment. Iwan has a pretty cool solution to that. So if you want to find out the VM which is eating up your storage or disk or network or CPU or memory, just single dashboard. How do you do that, Iwan?
Okay, so let's just take a look at it, right? So what we do here, we created a super matrix. We plot the maximum IOPS of any VMs that are hitting the array, right? And we plot them up. It can be like 1 day, 2 days, or 7 days.
Okay.
So in this example, we can see that the max IOPS spike up to 13,212.
That's a lot of IOPS.
Correct. So definitely there was a spike here, and it happened at 3 o'clock in the morning.
But if I look at the average, it's around 14.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So the max was 13,000, and the average is only 14. It's about 10. It's about 1,000 higher.
Times.
Right?
Okay.
1,000 times higher, right?
Yep.
So from here we can say that it's probably the job of a single VM. Somebody was doing an IO meter probably at 3 o'clock.
Maybe 1 or 2, because if there was more VMs doing that, the average would be much more higher, right?
And we can zoom into that specific time.
Okay.
So we know the time at 3 o'clock, 3:16 in the morning. We know.
So I can see this line, but I don't know which VM is doing it.
Exactly. So we can zoom in, right?
Okay.
And we can create a top end. Well, let's find out. And that's the top end.
Oh, so you're taking 3:15 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
You're putting that in a top end.
Right.
You're smart.
And I list the VM, and there you go. That's
Chinese
the VM.
are ruling the world.
Yeah. And that is the end of our talk. Short intro. The full 3-hour deck is available at our blog. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.